Real excited to have the opportunity to share this morning. And so we're continuing our series that we've been talking about over the past few weeks called Legacy. But before I do that, I need to make a quick announcement. I almost forgot. Is that if you signed up to be a group leader, we're going to be having a meeting on August the 2nd. It's a Wednesday evening. You should have received an email about that. But if you did sign up to be a group leader, make sure you don't miss that meeting. And also, if you would like to still be a group leader, you can still sign up to do that out in the foyer. The semester is going to start at the beginning of September. We're going to have a big launch weekend here at the end in August. And so groups are a big part of what we're doing, and we're trying to make them more of a larger part. Have you ever been in church and just felt like, I just don't have any friends. I don't have any close friends. Anybody felt like that before? I know I felt like that. I know I've had conversations with people. You just feel like I just don't have people around me to connect with and to do life with. And so what we're trying to do with groups is we're trying to create that, because what we found is that we don't necessarily go out of our way to connect with people. We wait for people to come and connect to us, don't we? And so groups is our way of trying to stir connection and trying to get people to do life together. And so if you're interested in leading a group, make sure you sign up in the foyer. We believe it's going to be a great thing. We're taking it to the next level this fall, so you don't want to miss it. Anyways, we're continuing this series that we've been doing called Legacy, and we're taking out of Hebrews 11 some of the greatest leaders in the Bible. And so far we've heard about Moses. A couple weeks ago we did Abraham, and then last week, if you weren't here, Pastor Shane preached on Noah, and it was an amazing message. If you did not get to hear that, you can listen to that on our app, or you can go on our website and hear that message. But this week, we're going to be talking about David. Anybody like David? So David is my favorite character in the Bible for many reasons, but one of the reasons is just his faith. And lots of stories that we could go into about David. Actually, David wrote a lot of the Psalms. Some theologians call it the guts of the Bible. The biggest part of the Bible was written by King David. And so David is a pretty big character. We're going to get into a story here of David's life here in just a moment. But in opening, I had this word on my heart that I kept kind of just going over that when I started putting this together. And the word was transition. And I feel like we all go through seasons, don't we? You're probably in a season right now, and we all go through different transitions between seasons. And so you might be in a season of life right now, or maybe you just got out of high school, or you're getting ready to graduate high school and go into the next season of your life. Or maybe you're getting out of college, maybe you are getting ready to get married, or you just got married and you're enjoying life before kids. Or that's the season that you're in, right? Or maybe you have kids, or maybe your kids are older and they're out of the house. But we all are in a different phase of life. We're all in a different season. And spiritually speaking, we all go through seasons, don't we? And some seasons have challenges. Some have unexpected turns or things that can try to come against us. Some seasons are great and you're just enjoying life, but we all have seasons. And this word transition kept just popping up when I was studying transition. And I felt like this is where I was going with it, is I think sometimes we tend to live for the transition rather than live in the now, don't we? Whatever season of life you're in, you're always looking forward to the next season. I remember when my wife and I got married, and there were a couple years that went by, and we started thinking about the idea of kids, right? We think we want to have kids, when we want to have it, and we're just looking forward to the next season. And then the next season comes, and you look back, and you're like, man, what did we do with our time, right? After you have kids. But we're always looking forward to the transition. And I think sometimes we're looking so forward to the transition that we miss what's happening now. And I started thinking, why do we get weary when we're waiting in the middle of a season? Why do we look forward to the next thing so much? And I think the reason is because we think that in the season that we're in, nothing is changing or nothing is happening in us. We're not growing, right? And a new season, a transition means change, right? It means new blessings, new obstacles, new things, right? And we look forward to that next season because we don't think anything is happening in the current season that we're in. But I like to show you that I think there's more happening in the season that you're in than you realize, right? There's growth happening in you, whether you realize it or not. Look at it. If you would go outside and look at a tree, you can stare at that tree for a year, right? And although it's probably growing, you would never see the growth, right? But if you go away for a year or 2 years or 3 years or more, and then you come back and look at that tree, you'd be like, wow, that tree did grow a little bit, right? You can see the change when you step away from it. But because you're in it, you're in the season, you're in the middle of that season, you can't see the change happening as fast. And sometimes it just gets, the waiting part just gets a little bit hard, right? And so we look forward to that transition, don't we? Man, we look forward to the next season. What's God going to do next? What's coming up next? And I think because of that, we miss the transformation that can happen right now in this season that we're in now. And so this kind of where I'm speaking from today is my title is Living for the Transformation. But often that we're all concerned about the transition, right? The next season, the next thing. But God is often concerned about the transformation that's happening in the season now. Because the truth is you can't get to the next season unless you go through what you have to go through in this season, right? Unless you grow in this season to prepare you for the next season. And so, and there's this principle in the Bible. The Bible works in seed time and harvest. And so you sow seed, and then you harvest seed, right? And I think that word, I heard somebody say this, it was really good. That word seed time needs to be separated because it's really how it is, right? First, it's seed, you sow seed, and then time, and then harvest, right? And I think sometimes we try to rush the time part. Like we want to sow seed and then reap the fruit, right? We want to sow and then the harvest. But there's this thing called time in the middle. And so being more concerned with the growth process of the middle of the season rather than looking forward to the transition. Are you with me this morning? And so David went through this process. Right? He had these times where he was in the middle of a season, and then he transitioned into a next season, and just like all of us. And so I'm speaking from David, a story from David, but I'm kind of going a different direction with David. There's a lot of stories that we could talk about with David. But to give you a little backstory of David, David was a shepherd, right? So he, does what shepherds do, hangs out in the fields, with the sheep, learning his little sheep call. And, I don't know what shepherds do. I'm just kind of making it up, right? Here, sheep, 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 right? I don't know what they do. So David is a shepherd, right? But the Bible says that he actually had to defend the sheep from wild animals, things that would try to attack. So during that season of David being a shepherd, he actually had to learn, right? Some things had to be developing in him. So you all know the story of David and Goliath. So they come to David. David has this opportunity where he steps up to defeat Goliath, right? None of the army would step up, of Israel, would step up against this giant Goliath. But King David did, right? Because of his prior season experience, he was ready for this challenge, right? And so you know the story. David defeats Goliath. So after David defeats Goliath, all of Israel was celebrating David. And they cheered this. In the Bible, it says they cheered for David. They said that Saul, which was the king at the time, they said, King Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed 10,000s. And they cheered and cheered and cheered. They celebrated David, because David became a mighty warrior. And so through this time of David, his progression and his growth and this time of him, King Saul started to get jealous. He didn't like David, right? He actually got to the point to where he was trying to kill David. He was chasing him around. He was out to get him. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to take him out, right? He didn't want him to live, okay? And so it's kind of where we're picking up our story here, but there's one little thing here is that King Saul's son, Jonathan, and David were friends, right? So imagine yourself, you're King David, you're David, right? You're running from Saul because he's trying to kill you all the time. He's constantly got people trying to kill you, and David keeps sneaking out, over and over and over. It's kind of this cycle, right? Because Saul is jealous. Saul's threatened by David and how a man of a faith he is, and how he's threatened by David, right? And so David is constantly trying to flee from Saul. Saul's trying to kill him. You with me? And so we're picking up our story here in 1 Samuel. It says, now it happened when Saul had returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, "Take note, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." And then Saul took 3,000 chosen men from Israel and went to seek David and his men on the rocks of the wild goats. So this is, it's kind of happening here. Saul catches wind. Hey, David's over here. Let's go get him. And so Saul grabs his 3,000 men. He's like, let's go get him. And they go to get David at the rocks of the wild goats, which I think is the coolest name for, a location. Why don't we have that in West Virginia, right? Hey, I'm going to go to the rocks of the wild goats. I'll meet you there. Oh, cool. So David and his men are on the rocks of the wild goats. And so he came to the sheepfolds by the road where there was a cave. Okay, so they go up to this cave. King Saul does. And Saul went to attend his needs. David and his men were staying in the recesses of the cave. So in our house, we would call it this. King Saul had to go potty. Okay, so we're on the same page. So King Saul had to go to the bathroom, so he goes into this cave, and David and his friends and his posse are hanging out in the cave, right? That King Saul's going in. They're looking for David everywhere, right? They go hide in this cave, and then it just so happens that King Saul goes to the exact cave where David is in. You with me? And so verse 4, then the men of David said to him, "This is the day which the Lord said to you." So they're trying to get him to kill David, or to kill King Saul here. "Behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, that you may do to him as it seems good to you." And David arose and secretly cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Now it happened afterward that David's heart troubled him because he had cut Saul's robe. And he said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing against my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord." So basically, they're trying to talk him into killing King Saul. Hey, here's your opportunity. We're in this cave. He doesn't know we're here. This is your shot, right? He's going potty. He has no idea. He can't defend himself, right? And so it says that David stood up and he went over and he cut off a corner of his robe. And I wonder why he did that. Was it to prove something to King Saul? Was it because he chickened out? Was it because he's a bad sword shot? I don't know. Why did he do that? But it says he cut off his robe and he felt bad instantly, right? And he went back to his guys and he said, "I can't do this because it's the Lord's anointed. I can't stretch out my hand against him, seeing that he's the anointed of the Lord," right? And so he feels bad and he decides not to do this. Verse 7. So David restrained his servants with these words and did not allow them to rise against Saul. And Saul got up from the cave and went on his way. David also arose afterward, went out of the cave, and called out to Saul, saying, "My lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped down with his face to the earth and bowed down. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Indeed, David seeks your harm'?" So he's saying, look, why do you listen to those people that tell me that I'm trying to kill you? Here's proof that I'm not, right? He's saying, I had this opportunity, yet I didn't do it. "Look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you today into my hand, and someone urged me to kill you, but my eyes spared you, and say, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." So Saul goes into this cave. He has to go potty, and David's hanging down there with his crew, right? And it's the perfect opportunity, and his guys say, "Hey, look, now's your opportunity. Now you can kill King Saul." And he cuts his robe. King Saul goes out of the cave, and David said, "Look, everyone says that I'm out to get you and I'm trying to kill you, but they're wrong. This is my real heart." So this is the kind of the story that we have here with King David. An interesting story, but I want to pull a couple points out of this story because I believe there's a lot here that we can learn from. And so today, as I talked earlier about, we all have seasons that we're going through, and we all have transition periods that are between seasons, right? Maybe you're in the middle of a season right now, and maybe it has its challenges. Maybe you're in the middle of a transition right now into a new season. Whatever the case, I want to learn something here, because here's the thing: David was getting ready to become king, and this could have been his shot to be king. All we had to do was kill King Saul and walk out there and show them his body, and he would have been the next king right there. But he didn't do that Because he handled the transition the right way. Are you with me? Here's the thing. How you are in your current season is how you're going to handle the transition into the next season. So it's important how you are in the season now that you're in. You with me? It's important that we take the season that we're in now, we maximize it for all that it is, and we try to live this life of transformation in this season here and now. So I'm speaking 3 points this morning from this story of the life of King David on during our season. You with me? All right, so the first point this morning, these are 3 things that David had. And the first one is David was bold under pressure. David was bold under pressure. He was bold. Of course, we know that David had bold faith, didn't he? And he had faith to face the lions that were coming against his sheep. He had faith to trust God and take on Goliath when none of the army would do that. He was bold in his faith, wasn't he? But another thing that David was bold in was his character. David was bold in his character. Now, I don't mean that David did everything right, because he didn't live the perfect life. He didn't do everything the right way. He actually had a lot of things that weren't good. But in this situation, David had bold character. Again, back in the scripture that we already read here, verse 4, it says, "The men of David said to him, 'This is the day the Lord said to you. This is your opportunity. We're going to kill him,' right? He's right here. He's right in front of us. He's defenseless. His army's out of the cave. This is the chance we have," right? And they're trying to talk him in to doing this thing. But the thing is that David had bold character. Come on. David had bold character. I want to ask you this question. What is it that you stand for? David stood on the truth that he would not go against his master, the king, right? Even though he was trying to kill him, he was confident in who he was and what he believed. But when it comes to you, what do you stand for? Because if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Come on. If you don't stand for something, any wind of doctrine that comes your way, any opportunity that comes your way, you're just going to jump right in. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Come on. What do you stand for? I heard this quote one time, and it was really good. And it says this, is that true maturity is having the character and the boldness to say no. Man, isn't that good? True character. And this is David in the situation, having the boldness to say, guys, look, no. This isn't the right thing to do. This isn't what God would have us do, right? He's our king. He's the anointed king. This is not the right thing to do, right? Boldness. Look at another story over here in the book of Acts. This is another example of this. And this is with Paul. So Paul is on a boat. He's on his way to see Caesar. He's a prisoner, and the boat shipwrecks, right? And he swims to this island, and it's called Malta. And so he's on this island of Malta, and this is kind of where this Paul's story picks up. It says, "But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat." So he's building a fire, and a snake comes out, and because of the heat, it fastened on his hand. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he has escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow him to live." But he shook it off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. However, they were expecting that he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead, but after they had looked for a long time and saw no harm would come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. Right? So here's Paul. He's building this fire on this island, and natives are all around, and they welcome him in, and he's building this fire, and a snake comes and grabs him on the hand. And he immediately, all the natives say, "Oh, he must have been a murderer. He's a goner. See ya," right? They go to assumption already, right? And then it says he shook the snake off. Some time had passed. They see that he didn't die. And so they came to a conclusion, oh, no, maybe he's a god, right? It's like, that's kind of like dramatic, right? He's a murderer. No, he's a god. The point that I told you that is that you cannot live your life based on pressure from outside sources. You can't live your life based on the criticism of other people or by the praise of other people. But you have to know what you stand for, and you have to know what your conviction is. You have to know what you believe. David was bold in his character. He knew what he would not do. Come on. So the first point is that David was bold under pressure. The second point this morning is that David was faithful when it mattered most. David was faithful when it mattered the most. David cut off Saul's robe, and he told his men, he said, look, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. But one of the things that he said is, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, for he is the Lord's anointed. You see, even though King Saul was trying to kill David, David was faithful to his master. He was faithful. But you know why he was faithful to his king? Because he was the Lord's anointed. He was the king. He was the authority that God had put in place at that time. He was faithful to him. And he says it here again. He said a little bit later on, he says, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. David was faithful to God, and he was faithful to his king. There's this thing called faithfulness that I feel like in our world and society today that we kind of trip up on. And really, another way of saying faithfulness is just this life, living a life of honor. A life of honor. You know, to honor something is to value something, to put weight to it. It means something important to you, right? When you honor somebody, you honor them, you value them, you don't treat them as a common, right? And we're to honor our authority. And David understood this principle of honor. Even though he was out trying to kill David, David said, but he is the anointed authority right now, and I have to honor who God has put in authority. You know, we have to honor who God has put in authority. When it comes to this house, we have to honor who God has put in authority, don't we? Even when it's hard to, because here's what happens. We get this thing called entitlement. No one's going to tell me what to do, right? You can't tell me how to live. You can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what I should or shouldn't do, right? We get entitlement, and it becomes about us, but we try to bring that into the church, right? And what it does is it turns into bitterness, and it turns into jealousy, and it turns into insecurity, and it turns into envy, right? All because of dishonor. And here we are, and we could be sitting in church. I don't know why they did that song. Whoa, that was bad. I don't know why he's preaching about this, or I don't know what he's trying to tell me how to live. You can't tell me how to live my life, right? And it all is because of unfaithfulness or because of dishonor. Come on, is this helping anybody this morning? But David understood this principle of honor, and he understood this principle of being faithful. You know that honor produces faith? Honor produces faith. I want to show you. Go to Mark chapter 6, this is verse 1 through 6. This is really good. You'll like this. So this is when Jesus went into his hometown to minister. Okay, it says, then he went out from there, came to his own country. This is Jesus. His disciples followed him. When the Sabbath had come, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished. And they weren't astonished in a good way. They weren't astonished like, wow, that's so awesome. They were saying, where did this man get these things? And what wisdom which is he given to him? Such mighty works are performed by his hands. Is this not the carpenter? Is it? Because you say, this is from Jesus' hometown. They're saying, look, isn't this Jesus? Like, he built my table. Like, I grew up with this guy, right? Isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, I'm guessing? Judas and Simon, are these not his sisters that are with us that live here now, right? He's like, man, this is the guy that we grew up with. We know him, right? We've been around him our whole lives. There was a common there, right? They treated him as a common person because they were familiar with him. But what they didn't do is they didn't honor him. They didn't honor what God had done in him and what God was appointing him to do. And because they treated him as common, they were not in honor. Okay, and it goes on, it says, so they were offended at him. Like I said, you know what causes offense? Jealousy, pride, insecurity, and envy. We allow those things to take root in us, and what it does is it causes offense. We get offended. That's not the way it should be. That's not the way I think it should be. You can't tell me what to do because of dishonor. But check this out. This Jesus said, he goes on, it says, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives and in his own house. What he was saying was, everywhere I go, I get honored. People honor me everywhere I go except when I go to my hometown. And it says he marveled because of their unbelief. It takes faith to have honor sometimes. But because of their unbelief, right, or because of their dishonor to Jesus, it caused unbelief. So honor produces faith. You want to walk in faith, walk in honor. Come on, is this helping anybody? Honor produces faith. Another thing, when you walk in honor and you walk in faith, it produces faithfulness. So we said David was faithful. David was faithful when it mattered most. When Saul was out to try to kill him, David was faithful. Right? It didn't matter what people were saying. It didn't matter what. He was faithful, right? One, because of his boldness of his character, because of who he knew he was, but he was faithful to King Saul. And when you walk in honor, it produces faithfulness. Check this out. When you walk your life in faithfulness, even when it doesn't make sense, you're faithful. Even when it's hard, you're faithful. Through the seasons, you're faithful, you're faithful, you're faithful, you're faithful. When it gets challenging, when you don't agree, when you think it could be different, you're faithful. You're faithful. You're going to get to a place where faithfulness produces understanding. You're going to get to a place and you're going to look back over your life and you're going to be like, oh, a light bulb's going to come on. It makes so much sense. Right? I get it now. But in the middle of the season, we get weary because we don't see it changing. Right? We don't see the growth. We don't see all the moving parts. All we can see is where we're at and what we're doing. And we're tempted to give up. But man, if we can just stay faithful. Come on, stay faithful. Stay the course. Don't give up, right? David was faithful to his king because it was the Lord's anointed. Is this helping anybody this morning? So we got one more point this morning. We've got to kind of move quick here. And this was the last one. So we said so far that David was bold, David was faithful, and the last one is this, is that David was pure in his motives. David was pure in his motives. One thing that the Bible talks about David, and it says that he was a man that was after God's own heart. And he held the ways of God. He honored who God appointed. He was a man of pure motives. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite characters in the Bible. But just this idea of having pure motives. The theme of your heart determines the story of your life. What's the theme of your heart? What are your motives like? And we can have lots of different motives. What are your motives? Because the theme of your heart, the motives of your heart will determine the story of your life. And another thing is you can see the motive of your heart by what you're saying. What's coming out of your mouth. You know, you can fool a lot of people with who you are, but eventually it's going to leak. Come on. Who you really are is going to leak. What's in your heart, the person that you are, the motives of your heart is going to come out, right, of your mouth. You can talk to anybody in here and over a few minutes learn somebody's passions, figure out what somebody likes, what they dislike. When it comes to the motive of your heart, what is the motive of your heart? Because I think, the world feeds on who you are on the outside. But to God, it's all about the motive of your heart. It's all about who you are on the inside. That matters, right? And so David, he was bold, he was faithful, and he had pure motives. So I want to kind of end with this morning, because we talked earlier about we're all in a season. Whatever season of life you're in spiritually, we all go through seasons, and you might be looking forward to the next transition and wondering what change is happening right now in the season that you're in. But David, he transitioned. Eventually, Saul died, and he became king, and he was king for 40 years over Israel. And so this next scripture here is when he was transitioning out. Because what you do in the season you're in is going to set you up for the season that you're about to be in. What you do with what you're given now, the season that you're in, is setting you up for what the season is to come. And so this is what David told his son before he became king. Okay, this is 1 Kings 2. It says, "Now the days of David drew near that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man." This is what he tells him, verse 3. This is what proves the motive of David's heart right here. Ready? It says, "And keep charge of the Lord your God. Walk in his ways, keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you turn." You see, David had this thing that he was not about to compromise God's ways. Man, his motives were pure in the fact that he wanted what God wanted. He honored who God appointed. He was bold when it mattered most, when there was pressure against it, right? Come on, you understand what I'm saying here? It's all about the ways of God. And I want us, could you imagine a church where the only thing that we're number one concerned with was what God had for us in that season? I'm all about the ways of God. I'm not going to compromise it for anything. I'm not going to settle for anything else, right? It's just about the ways of God. And we were determined the motive of our heart was to walk in the ways of God. You can go ahead and stand up this morning. The transformation that is happening in you now is setting you up for the transition later. It's setting you up for the transition later. And like I said many times, that we're all going through seasons of life. We're all going through different phases of life. And you may be in a season right now where you're just up against a lot. Maybe there's a lot happening. You have a lot of challenges facing you, a lot of things that are coming against you. And I want to encourage you with this, is that don't allow one season to destroy your story. Don't allow one season to destroy your story. Man, I believe that God has called you to great things. He's called you to do amazing things. And don't allow one season to destroy your story. Let's pray this morning. God, I thank you.